All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name's Sean Heritage. I'm here from Horizon 3, moderating a panel of hand-selected people to talk about our individual respective transitions from military service. So unlike normal Horizon 3 webinars, we're not going to dazzle you with our product and our unique capability. We're going to talk about transition from the military, and wanted to first acknowledge our role as Horizon 3 as a voice of the veteran in the community, alongside CyberWire and Ruddershift as well. So we have three individuals here joining me. We have Brandon Karpf from the CyberWire, a proud veteran-friendly company where 25% of their team is veterans. Carlos Cabello and myself representing Horizon 3, where we're roughly 33% of veterans on our team. And Kristin Scott from Ruddershift, who's 100% veteran friendly. And we're not going to spend a lot of time today talking about who we were when we proudly wore a uniform. We're going to talk about who we were through transition, what we learned, and who we have become as a result, in part, from the transition experience, but also after a career in military service. But before we talk about who we are and our transition experience, I wanted to have each individual talk a little bit about who they were. And I'd like to first start with my teammate here at Horizon 3, Carlos from the United States Army. Carlos.
Hey, thanks, Sean. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, so just a little bit of background. I'm a recently retired Army Chief Warrant Officer. I served 30 years as an intelligence technician, both in conventional and special operations throughout my time. Sean, back to you.
All right. Kristin.
Hi, I'm Kristin Scott. I retired from the Navy a little over 3 years ago. Now, I was a CTI Senior Chief, which is a language analyst for all you non-Navy folks out there.
All right, and Brandon.
Hey everyone, Brandon Karpf. I commissioned in the Navy as a cryptologic warfare officer in 2015. Spent most of my time active duty working the cyber mission with one detour on the surface side of things. And I officially separated from active duty on the 31st of December of 21, so just 19 days ago.
Great, we'll take each of you. So you can see, as I look at some of the attendees, it's no accident that we have a junior officer here, a previous junior officer who navigated transition after his jail experience. We have a seasoned warrant officer who saw life as enlisted as well as an officer, and managed his transition from that vantage point. And then Kristin from the senior enlisted folks. And to round it out from the overly indoctrinated perspective, myself, who served for 27 years, also like Brandon as a cryptologic warfare officer. And I was fortunate enough to stick the landing twice. I just started here at Horizon 3 51 days ago. On the second chapter of my career 2.0, as I like to call it. So now we're going to transition into some questions, and I would encourage each and every one of you to ask questions in the Q&A portion of this platform on Zoom that you're watching this, and we will weave your questions in as we go and or address them at the end. All four of us spend a fair amount of our time coaching people through transition informally. And none of us like to assume that we know what's on your mind, but we gave ourselves a list of questions based on our experiences of things that we think you'd like to hear about. But if there are other things that you want to talk about, we're ready, willing, and able to address those. So I'll start once again with Carlos. Carlos, what's the biggest challenge you personally faced during your transition from the military?
Yeah, sure. So probably one of the biggest challenges that I faced was really information overload. So literally there is different, courses you can take. There's people sending you different resources. There's all sorts of links out there. The military and Department of Defense all provide you many, many opportunities to learn different benefits, different courses of action you can take to help transition. So I think really that amount of information coming at you while you're still kind of doing your job, trying to transition. You're also getting this huge amount of information and resources to try to wade through and figure out what is best. And of course, it's not one size fits all. So really being able to try to discern what was important to me and being able to really help backwards plan and kind of figure out what was the best information that I could take away. And honestly, I think there was one PowerPoint presentation with probably about 50 slides in it that came from Big Army. And literally that was a step-by-step process of like, here's all the things you need to do. And literally I used that kind of as my guidebook on top of a bunch of other resources, but really that was the one go-to thing that I used throughout my transition.
Yeah, and I mean, we talk about challenge, right? As those of you who are going through the challenges that are transition, it's real. I know I personally struggled a great deal with the letting go aspect of such a long time in service. So I want to focus our time on addressing the fact that it is challenging. It's not easy, and quite honestly, I would say that finding a job, for me anyway, was the easiest aspect of it all. It was more about getting my mind right, and that's why this is focused, or we named this webinar "Stick the Landing," because we know from experience that a lot of time and talk is given to how to get out of the military, and in our opinion, not enough is spent on how to land well outside the military. So Kristin, we chose Kristin on purpose, in part because she gets to speak for a lot of people, because one of the things she does with her company is help others with the transition, make them aware of the resources that are available to them, and coach them on how to best leverage them. So Kristin, not only from your personal experiences, but from those who you serve through Ruddershift, can you talk a little bit about challenges that you personally experienced and seen others navigate?
Yeah, definitely. I think you alluded to it a little earlier, Sean, and it's for me, it's been seeing the challenges associated with the mindset shift from, and it's across the board, ranks, officer, enlisted, shifting from that sense of duty and purpose to what we're doing in the military, to shifting to a focus that's just on ourselves. And it doesn't matter how long we've been in the military. We all have that sense that we're maybe being a little disloyal in doing that, right? It feels selfish to think about ourselves and to prioritize ourself as an individual. But it's absolutely necessary as you're navigating your transition, at least in my opinion, because no one cares about your transition from the military more than you do. And ultimately, you're the one that should remain in control of it at all times and as much as you realistically can.
Sean, I just want to tie on to what Kristin just said. So that was another challenge that I had to go through, was really getting into that frame of mind of that, no kidding, I'm leaving the military. I'm no longer going to be that chief warrant officer in the Army, and that I did need to get in a different frame of mind. And I've talked to several transitioning veterans now, and that's something I try to key in on, is that your unit is going to continue doing the mission, whether you're there or not. So literally, I've had guys say, man, I'm trying to time my transition out so I can be here and support my unit, and I've seen guys like burn it down until their last week in the military and like still working. And the next week when they're gone, mission continues, right? So like, I think that's huge, Kristin, and that point you made.
Yeah, well said to both of you. I shake my head whenever I see on LinkedIn somebody posting, hey, I just had my retirement ceremony yesterday. I guess I'm going to go find a job now. And I feel so bad for them, but they're almost prideful that they sprinted to the end, right? And now it's on them, and I'll go back to, when I was a commanding officer, my XO or our XO retired out of the XO job. And he was committed till the end. I had to ask him to leave. I had to relieve him so that he could do right by himself and his family and make transition a priority. He ended up landing pretty well, but all too often we're so committed, take so much pride in mission, as you said, Carlos, that we're not willing to begin, let go. So Brandon, we got a question in the chat now that I just want to point you towards answering. Because I know that, through our time together, as you were navigating transition, you had tons of opportunities. You could have done so many different things, and you chose to land where you did. So the question is, how did you figure that out? How did you figure out where you wanted to land, and how far away were you willing to get from the world that you just left?
Yeah, the challenge with figuring out what you're going to do, and one of the questions alludes to this, is the entire world's open to you. And it really was to me. I knew that I wanted to do something somewhat related to cybersecurity. That was it, though. And those of you who know that community know that that doesn't really mean anything. You can do policy, you can do education, you can do hardcore coding and software development. That domain really encompasses everything in the professional world. So when it came down to deciding, my wife and I, my wife also transitioned out of the Navy this past year, we decided to start narrowing it down by having a framework. And honestly, what we decided first was where. It wasn't what, it wasn't at what organization, it was actually where in the country we wanted to move to. So we wrote up every place we imagined we could possibly live, put it on the fridge, and every couple of days, going to the ship or going into work, we would discuss another one off the list and mark it off. And eventually we got down to where in the country we wanted to live. And that's how we started narrowing what companies and organizations we'd look at. From there, it was really discovering internally what type of work roles I was interested in. And there's no amount of reading, no amount of self-discovery you can do that'll really tell you that. You have to get out there and talk to people in those roles. And so I spent about 6 whole months talking with hundreds of people, everyone I could connect with on LinkedIn, every podcast guest I was listening to, I'd reach out to them and say, hey, I'm a transitioning naval officer, want to talk about what you're doing. And so I talked with salespeople, I talked with product developers, CEOs, marketers, running the whole gambit of work roles, and slowly narrowed it down to the type of roles I found interesting, and then looked for those kind of roles. It was less about the organization and what they're actually doing, and more about what I would be doing for the organization, and then the team that organization encompasses. So I was a technologist, I was an engineer. I thought I wanted to be a cybersecurity engineer. That's not what I am. I'm at a media company building media products. We do podcasts, we do newsletters, and I help design those products to better educate the cybersecurity community. So it's really nothing like what I did in the Navy, although there are some skills there. But that's the kind of process we went through. It took a lot of work every single day to figure that out.
Kristin, you had something you want to add? Thanks, Brandon.
I did, because I love what Brandon was saying there. He's describing perfectly this concept of the informational interview, which I think is crucial, key. Like, if there was one answer to that question, like, how do you figure out what you want to do? Informational interview is the way to go. And because I think there are like 3 pillars of when you're trying to answer that question. It's the where, like Brandon said, it's the how much. That's really important. And the what's, right? So, and you have to figure out which one of those is the priority. If it's the how much, then maybe you're going to stay, doing what you're doing, and, just take off your uniform and put on your civilian clothes the next day and go do that, right? But if it's the where, if you're going to go live in, Ohio somewhere, and they don't do what you do in the military there in that small town in Ohio, then you're going to have to adjust the other 2 pillars based on your primary pillar. And the informational interview can help you figure out what that looks like, especially in an area in terms of like what you want to do that you're not really familiar with. And a great way to find people to do informational interviews with is on LinkedIn. You can search by background, right? So Carlos can look for other Army warrant officers who are now maybe working, across the country in a completely different field, and use that background to reach out to them that way and make the ask of, hey, can you spend some of your valuable time with me answering my questions about what you do and how you do it?
So thanks, Kristin. No, I really appreciate both of those perspectives. The question also gave me reason to think about, the core of the question is how far away were you willing to get from that which was familiar? And as I compare notes with people, I see people who retire and then do the same job, just out of uniform, same desk. Right? I see others who go to school or just reinvent themselves completely differently. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, the most educational opportunity that I had in figuring out the what I might want to do was the SkillBridge opportunity. And I know that that's something that not everybody gets the opportunity to do. In fact, I still believe that far too few people even know that it exists. I think far too many people think it's not an opportunity for senior enlisted or senior officers. It's for junior enlisted and JOs, which nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, I would say that the longer you're indoctrinated, the more you need a SkillBridge experience. But I'd like to ask Carlos, because he had, like so many others, had a unique approach to leveraging SkillBridge and another internship program. So Carlos, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I was actually had a unique opportunity coming out of special operations. So I was able to leverage 2 internships, one through the SOCOM Care Coalition, and then one through Hiring Our Heroes. Both of them are part of the larger DoD SkillBridge program, but it gave me the unique opportunity to test the waters in not only a small startup company. So I came to Horizon 3 back in November of 20, when there was about 20 people in the company. So it was cool to get into the startup very early time, understand how things work and the environment and culture within a startup company. My second internship was through Hiring Our Heroes, and I was able to then go do an internship with a large Department of Defense contractor. So then it gave me that big global picture to be able to see, and again, the environment and the culture going into this huge, massive organization, similar to the military that I was just transitioning from. So it's really cool to be able to leverage SkillBridge for both those aspects of a small company, a large company, and then gave me the ability to make up my decision going forward on what I preferred. And obviously I landed back with Horizon 3 and a startup company. I really, to me, I enjoyed the smaller company. I enjoyed the more intimate relations with leaders within the company, and then really being able to have a voice and be able to influence what was happening within the company. So that's really how I leveraged SkillBridge. I had initially thought about, hey, maybe I'll do Onward to Opportunity or something like that, where you could go get your PMP certificate or something like that. But to me, that wasn't as important as actually getting the hands-on skills of working within the companies.
So you can tell Carlos wasn't one of those guys who posted on LinkedIn after a retirement ceremony that, hey, it's time to think about transition. And that's a gift, right? We know that not all jobs allow people the opportunity to make transition a priority. We know that not all chains of command are comfortable letting people do right by themselves and their family. And I know friends that have experienced both of those. So I can't reiterate the fact enough that it is a gift, and a gift that I hope that everybody watching gets. Brandon is another person who didn't wait to create transition opportunities. You already talked a little bit about it, but Brandon, can you talk specifically about your SkillBridge experience and how you negotiated that great opportunity?
Sure. Yeah, my chain of command at the time was definitely more along the lines of not comfortable with the idea of SkillBridge, and I really had to convince them. I was coming off of a sea tour. I was assigned to a ship, and those the audience who knows that world, manning is always a struggle. And when you send out a person to SkillBridge, you don't get a backfill. So I approached it first by giving my chain of command a lot of time to actually consider it. I approached them probably about 12 months before I wanted my SkillBridge to start, and have the conversation, open conversation with my CO and my XO about what the opportunity would be and what it would mean. And what I brought to the table was a willingness to extend on board a number of months. provided that they allow me then to go and participate in SkillBridge. So that's how I approached the command. The other benefit is I didn't owe the Navy anything at the time. I could have gotten out of the Navy early before my SkillBridge and just left the command. So what I was offering was I will give the command 4 more months of my time working on the projects that you have me working in exchange for 4 months of SkillBridge. And ultimately, to my command's credit, they agreed and they approved it. As for the what with the SkillBridge, that was also kind of an adventure because I didn't go onto the SkillBridge website and find an opportunity that existed. I created my own. And the process for creating my own was a lot of fun. And I did create the program at CyberWire. And that really grew organically. That grew out of those informational interviews that we were talking about, where I reached out to the company because I had been a user of their products and I'd gotten to know over about a year and a half. I got to know the CEO really well. I was looking at it as a networking opportunity. It's a media company. They know everybody in cyber. So clearly they could get me interviews and connect me with all these other people in cybersecurity. And over months of talking with him, he eventually said, why don't you just come work for us? We can kind of figure out the SkillBridge thing. I know that you were trying to do it with some other companies, but we'll build one here and I'm kind of interested in getting more vets in and doing it here. So I designed the program. I ghost wrote all the emails, designed the training plan for the SkillBridge program at CyberWire, and got it approved through the DoD's program. And that was the kind of the other side of SkillBridge, besides getting my chain of command to say yes and having to pay for it, right? I had to give them time to do it. Also designing the program that I wanted to do with an organization that I really was passionate about.
Very cool. Very cool. Before I ask Kristin to say a few words about how she sees others go through the program, I'll share that unlike Carlos and Brandon, I didn't land at the company where I did a SkillBridge. I did a SkillBridge at Splunk. I happened to be retiring out of the Defense Innovation Unit out in Silicon Valley, wanting to do a SkillBridge program. Didn't know how to do it. I found Hiring Heroes, I forget which one. And I had it all set up where I was going to do a SkillBridge with LinkedIn. So I was going to apply to hire our heroes, and then LinkedIn was going to cherry pick me, and I was going to get to do that. The cohort model that they used did not work for me. I had a very different desire when it came to a start date and an end date. So much like Brandon, I created my own experience. I had a colleague who worked at Splunk who was well positioned there. And I was the first Splunk turn using the SkillBridge program. And we created the program while I was there as well. And just as Brandon spoke about the learning curve, it's deliberate engagement where you get to learn about the different work roles in a company. That's how I leveraged the program. I learned what business development was. I learned what sales was. I learned what product marketing was. I learned what customer success was. I learned what internal operations was. And I could then decide how I wanted to contribute to a tech company, because I knew I wanted to work in tech. I just didn't know how I wanted to contribute to a team. And through that process, I learned that I love having an impact. And you have larger impacts on smaller teams. So I landed at a smaller team where I could not only learn a lot and work cross-functionally, but I could also inform the trajectory of that company. So I wanted to share that. And I'm going to ask Kristin, who helps many people navigate the process, if you could share some complementary approaches to leveraging the SkillBridge program and others.
Yeah, I like hearing it. Brandon and Sean, you guys both were able to create kind of your own experience for SkillBridge in the Navy. It's changed a little bit in that the Navy used to be a lot more flexible about companies participating, but now companies need to be on the DoD approved list before any service member can participate with them, including Navy. And that's part of what I do is help facilitate that with companies, because I think it's so important. What you both were able to accomplish was to be really aware of what you wanted to learn about during SkillBridge. Kind of certainly SkillBridge exists as a pathway to full-time employment, And especially if you're speaking to anyone from the DoD who has authorization over the program, right? Like SkillBridge was born specifically to reduce the unemployment benefits that services were having to pay for military members getting out of the service and not finding full-time employment when they were done. So I think it's important to always remember that from that perspective, that's the big brother reason why it exists, right? But within that program, when you can examine your own goals and where you want to be at the end of your program, and then use that to inform your selection of SkillBridge program. When I retired 3.5 years ago, there was no plethora of SkillBridge opportunities to choose from, right? So it wasn't even a question of which one was right for me. It was more just like, how the heck am I going to be able to do this? But now service members, I mean, I don't even know. I think that it's near 2,000 companies that are approved SkillBridge providers now, if you look at the SkillBridge website today, which is just amazing. And it is kind of a wide open world. So then how do you choose? And I think the way that all of you approached it by examining kind of goals beyond the full-time employment, right? Like you're not exactly sure what you want to do in terms of full-time employment, but you have a general idea. And I think one of the greatest benefits about SkillBridge is the space that it affords people to make those kind of inquiries. And under the safety of not potentially having to live in a box when you're done with your examination, right? You have that safety of your pay and benefits. Your family doesn't have to take on the stress of you going off on this exploration, right? So I think that's really important and can then also lead to excellent full-time employment, whether it's with the SkillBridge provider that you're with, or like Sean, if you realize that you want to go in a different direction based on your SkillBridge experience. And so I think sometimes people wouldn't consider that situation to be a success, but I absolutely do, right? I don't think that SkillBridge success means that you become a full-time employee of the company that you participated in SkillBridge with. I think it can look like that, but I also think that it was a valuable experience just to understand that that you want to move in a different direction. And now neither the company nor the service member is stuck in a commitment that they're not happy with.
Sean, real quick, I just wanted to add something on. So all great points, Kristin. The hard part for me was when I decided not to go back to my second internship company and have to tell them that I didn't want to accept their job offer. That to me was pretty hard because I had worked with them for 3 months, right? And like got pretty close with a couple of the people on the team. And so to go back to my boss who had invested time and spent effort with me and provided me my IT and software and support and everything, but going back to her and saying, hey, sorry, I'm not going to accept that job offer. Like to me, that was probably one of the hardest things I had to do during the transition.
Absolutely. I think it also, that kind of speaks to that loyalty and guilt thing. But I think something that is important for service members to understand as they're entering the civilian job market is that you have to shift that sense of loyalty onto yourself. And it's away from the organization. And I think, Sean, that you've spoken about this recently. And I thought you communicated it really eloquently, that you do, like it still exists, that still exists within inside of you, that loyalty and that dedication to a mission, but it's about you and what you can contribute, because as great as a company may be to work for, their bottom line is still their top priority, no matter what. They can have a great working environment. You can love to work with them. You can absolutely appreciate the opportunities that they've given you. But it's just, I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you prioritize loyalty to the organization over loyalty to yourself, which is an extension of loyalty to your family as well.
Super, great. So common thread there. It's a SkillBridge and other programs are about learning, right? Learning what you want to do, learning what you don't want to do. But I want to emphasize the learning aspect as opposed to the doing aspect, because one of the questions that I hated when I was going through transition, and I don't enjoy asking now, so I don't, but I'll share it here as an example. What do you want to do next? Right? I hated that question. It was suffocating. I don't know what I want to do next. There's so many things I could do, right? And I'll tell you, I mean, it was a simple twist. My current boss, Snehal Antani, our CEO, when he was reaching out for me to potentially come join this team, he flipped that question and he asked me, what do you want to learn next? And I said, wow, that's a simple reframing of a question that I can get behind. And I thought deeply about what I wanted to learn after my first chapter as a civilian. And I'm getting to do that right now, right? I'm learning as I'm doing. And that's something that I would encourage each of you to think through, as opposed to spending too much time on trying to figure out what is it you want to do next. Think about what you want to learn next. I think it's an easier thing for us to get around or our head around. We got another question coming in that I want to hit on, and I'm going to ask, I'll say Brandon to answer this one. This one's about compensation. What do you wish you would have known then that you know now about compensation? And I'll just tee it up by saying I love the fact that, and I'm going to make an assumption here, that the person asking the question understands that compensation and salary are not the same thing, which I think too many veterans believe is true. So Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head up front. Compensation is a lot more than that, right? It's salary, it's benefits, it's if you're at a company that offers it equity, it's matching contributions to 401k. I also look at it as team, like emotional compensation. I really connect well with my teammates at CyberWire. It is an awesome group of people. It is a whole bunch of nerds, and I am a massive nerd. And so just being on the company's, chat, our Slack channels, that's compensation to me, because it's a lot of fun nerding out over Dune and, the various Star Wars television shows. But when it comes to like monetary and more, material compensation, I am really bad at that. I'm not a good negotiator. So my approach was pretty direct, and I took it with most of the organizations I interviewed with, which was I had priced out exactly what I needed and what I was comfortable accepting as a salary. And when they would ask, I would preface it with, I'm not really into negotiating. I'm telling you exactly what I need. And here's my number. And if it connects, great. And if it doesn't connect, also great. We'll go on our separate ways. But I knew exactly what salary I needed for my lifestyle. I wasn't into gaming the system. So I'll get that salary, great. Now let's look at benefits. Let's look at healthcare and dental and eye care and retirement accounts and equity and have those negotiations afterwards. But I always started with the salary that I knew that I needed. And that was a discussion between me and my wife. We looked at our finances, we looked at our mortgage and figured out what I had to make for us to be comfortable and also to continue moving forward and growing. The last thing you really want to do, and you might have to take I'll say what I believe, which is you don't need to take a step back getting out of the military. I didn't. I didn't take a step back in terms of compensation. I priced it out. I knew exactly what I wanted and what I needed, and that's how I targeted my job hunt. And you can do that. You have the flexibility. I would say the other thing that I know about the job market now might not always be true, but right now it is a job hunter's market. My wife, I mentioned, also a transition naval officer. She just recently left the job that she did her SkillBridge at, and then worked there for 8 months after SkillBridge. And she was kind of feeling stuck and wanted to move on. And so she's looking for jobs, and the negotiating power is 100% in her side of the court. She has all of the negotiating power. Because of the way that the job market's looking right now. So that's pretty much it. I hope that answered the question. If not, Sean, let me know.
No, I think you did a really good job. I like how you zoomed out and took it even further than I would when you talk about the culture and the team that you're a part of. I mean, we get so focused on compensation equals salary, not true, right? Or I need to earn at least as much as I made when I was wearing a uniform. And then you have others who say, well, as long as my salary plus my retirement equals my active duty pay, then I'm good, right? They're all, I think, unhealthy ways of looking at it. So I really like what you had to say about that. Carlos, did you have anything to offer in addition to that?
Yeah, I was actually going to pile on to your comment, both your guys' comments, really about the culture. So as far as compensation, like a 30-year CW5 retirement is nice, and compensation pay-wise wasn't necessarily what I went into the job market looking at. To me, getting into an organization that had a culture that I enjoyed working in and for, like that was the top of the list for me. The Department of Defense contractor that I went to, I had no desire to be just another number cog in the wheel. Like that emotional compensation, Brandon, that you talked about, like that was huge for me going into the job hunt market.
Yeah, if I can add there, right, I did not accept the job that would have paid me the most. Definitely not. Probably the job I'm at is probably paying me 50% of what the jobs that would have paid me the most had offered. But those jobs were, Booz Allen Hamilton, and God bless you if that's what you want to do. But that's just not the life I wanted. I liked working remote, and I liked the lifestyle of being able to do yoga with my wife every lunch in our home. I love that. That's great. And so that is a huge part of the compensation in my book, is literally being 15, 20 feet from my wife, where she's working in her office, I'm working in mine. We get to do yoga. We get to walk the dog throughout the morning. And yeah, I had to accept a little bit of, not as big of a salary, but that's not all that compensation has to do with.
All right, Kristin, you're chomping at the bit. Go.
I do, because there's a lot there, but I really like the way, Brandon, that you did those calculations beforehand and figured out what that number was, even if it was just a ballpark, right? Because not everyone who's leaving the military is in a position where they have, a retirement income to rely on, like Brandon. And so it can be really scary. And some people who are leaving the military are the sole income earner for their family. And so it's not just their own livelihood that they have to support when they leave, but, a whole bunch of other lives also feel like kind of are, on your shoulders. And so I think it can be less scary if you are able to do a little bit of those calculations beforehand and get that ballpark figure in your head, so that when you're going out there and having to do the negotiation, which I also hate, Brandon, it's awful. But at least you know where you are, right? But the other side of that is, I think there's always the advice out there of like, know your worth, know your value. Like you don't have to take a step back, Brandon, like you said. But you're also not entitled to kind of jump in higher than perhaps your experience in the civilian world qualifies you for. And then there's a whole other aspect of like working at a government contractor versus a private company, which we don't have to get into during this webinar, but there's definitely a difference in how that compensation works and is offered as well. So also be aware of the limitations of the job to which you're applying, in terms of, you may think that, your value and your worth is X amount, and I'm sure it absolutely probably is. But the reality of the business is that it's only down here, right? And so you're like, Brandon, your mindset, I think, was great, was that, okay, well then I'll just go find somewhere where this does work for me. And so I think you have to be willing to do that, which I think is also something that service members struggle with, right? Because they identify this opportunity and this would be great for me. All they have to do is give me what I want. And I've seen that backfire too much.
All very good. I appreciate, Brandon, you bringing up remote work as well, because that's a foreign concept to probably most, if not everybody, watching today. It's so commonplace nowadays in the COVID world in which we live. And, once I got a taste of remote work, I love public service, but I don't think I'm going back.
Never gonna go back.
Like,
Right.
I
But
think we
it's
all
so
come
great.
from like similar career backgrounds, where maybe even just a window was a luxury. And I can work outside now in the fresh air and sunshine. There's no way. There's just no way I'm going back in there.
Yeah, so I have friends who are fairly senior in DoD, and and we talk about potentially going back. And you make remote work real, maybe, but until then, not a chance. So, but it's not for everybody. So I have friends who hate remote work. They don't, but whether their home life isn't accommodating, right? Or they'll spend their days in Panera or Starbucks, trying to find a quiet place to work. So it's not for everybody. You see a lot of headlines here that the four of us love it, but it's not for everybody. So I would encourage you guys to experiment with that a little bit, and find out what your level of comfort is with remote work.
Hey, real quick, Sean, on that, a story when I was going through my Hiring Our Heroes internship. So there were guys here. I'm in the Vegas area, and there were guys participating in the program that were doing their internship with Amazon. And they were operations specialists or whatever they call them, but they were in the warehouses in the summer in Vegas, and they were not happy. So like being out there working in the heat, they definitely learned that job was not for them, and ended up declining the job offer from Amazon.
Very good. Thanks for sharing. I want to ask a fairly open-ended question, because all three of you have done a great job of making yourself aware of the programs that are out there, the resources that are available to us. And in fact, for the audience, we have a really long list of resources that we will share. But I want to ask each of you, and we'll start with Brandon, I guess, because you're longest to speak ago. But what is your favorite resource that you were using, the most valuable resource that you, I won't say stumbled across because you're deliberate in everything you do, but what was that best resource for you, most helpful?
Yeah, this mentor of mine, who I found while transitioning, told me to make my calendar public to everyone on the ship. And I actually had a whiteboard calendar in my office on the ship where I would put a month calendar and a week planner. I would put every single transition thing on that calendar. Every phone call, every informational interview, every medical appointment. I had a public calendar that my CO, my XO could see, my division could see. And I made it clear that when I had a blacked out thing for my transition, that was non-negotiable. I would miss meetings. That's fine. I would miss PT for my transition. That's fine. For me, the most valuable resource was my public calendar, because it meant that, one, I was holding myself accountable. Two, everyone else knew when I wasn't there, I was getting my medical appointment done, or I was having an informational interview, or potentially a job interview. It proved to everyone that I was taking it super seriously. I wasn't just joking off. I wasn't just skipping out on work and being lazy, but I was treating it like part of my job, which really it was part of my job. So for me, public calendar, make sure everyone knows exactly what you're doing.
So that is wonderful and true to form, very unique answer, Brandon. So thank you for sharing that perspective. And as I talk to people back that are serving right now, and I kind of kick myself, or my former self, because I don't know that I was other than that story I told you about my XO, I don't know that I was a good teammate in helping people to make transition the priority. Those of you who are still on the inside, please, use your authority, your influence to help people get it right. Carlos, what was your most valuable resource as you were navigating transition?
Yeah, sure. So really leveraging my network of people that I had met throughout my time in the military was probably one of my greatest resources. Really, I tried to leverage the guys that had retired. And I was fortunate enough to have two warrant officers that retired probably the year before I did. So I got to watch all their trials and tribulations of transitioning, and what they did, what they didn't do, what they learned, what they wished they had done. And all those lessons learned that they were able to provide me was really, really helpful. Again, back to the information overload, right? They all had their Excel spreadsheets of like calendars and, hey, these are all the gates you need to hit during your time. And again, it was not one size fits all, right? So like looking at theirs, I looked at it briefly and I was like, oh, that's great. But I put it to the side because literally it didn't fit what I needed to do. But just listening to them talk about like, hey, you got to start your VA process. Hey, make sure you get your medical records updated. Like do all these things. Like that was some of the key stuff that the vets that were just getting out prior to me, I really, really try to leverage that. And that, I think that was probably the best resource that I had at my disposal.
Cool. How about you, Kristin?
And I'm listening to Brandon and Carlos. I wish I had a mentor like Brandon when I was retiring. I feel like, I definitely didn't have visibility into as many of the resources then as I do now. And Carlos, I like what you said too, because I think there is just this information overload. And I don't think there's any one person out there, no matter how much any of us want to help, the people that are coming behind us with their transition, none of us can know what's best for any one individual who's leaving the military. And that's why I say it's so important to own your own transition. And so you can like Carlos, take on board the information that you hear and decide what's going to work for me, and then set aside the rest of it. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. That said, I think that the calendar idea is great. And I think communicating your intentions early and advocating for yourself within your chain of command and your work center is awesome. Some people don't have that, either the positionality, I'll say, by virtue of their rank in their work center to be able to strongly advocate for themselves. And some just even if they try, just don't have supportive chains of command. And that's just a reality. And so a resource that I really recommend for both SkillBridge and finding employment is 50 Strong. Even if you don't have any time during your workday to focus on your transition or do transition activities beyond what's mandated, 50 Strong kind of provides really distilled opportunities, so direct connections with employers that are coming in just to speak with you one-on-one in Zoom breakout rooms. And so you have recruiters from big name companies like Amazon, like Google, all the ones that you might think of, and they're spending an hour with you in a room where you can see their face and you can speak back and forth about their opportunities and what you can bring. And it's in a way that really condenses that time. So it's really value add for a relatively short investment of time. And so 50 Strong, absolutely, I would recommend.
Very good. Thank you. I guess I'll add to that list by sharing a little bit about my love for the Commit Foundation. I was fortunate enough to be tipped off by a colleague about the Commit Foundation, and they were just an integral part in me getting my mind right. So I know it's the second or third time I said that, because for me, mentally was the biggest challenge. And the way the Commit Foundation works is they issue you an executive coach. And the way I approached it is I met with my executive coach once a week. They have this program that they take you through, which is a lot about thoughtful reflection. You find yourself doing Strength Finders 2.0. You find yourself reading Designing Your Life book, and just thinking about what are you good at? What can you get paid for? What do you enjoy? And for me, and it folds into another question that we got about ultimately making a decision about where to land, right? So at the tail end of my Commit Foundation experience, again, going back to my military mind, our military mind, I had COA criteria. I had a little table of all the constraints that I had in place, all the things that mattered to me most, with the goal of being able to unemotionally compare offer letters as they came in. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I had 100 offer letters. That wasn't it. I was very focused in my transition in the companies that I reached out to, but because I had established that COA criteria, I was able to say, this gets more points than this. And much like Brandon, I did not land at the company that had the best compensation package, but it best met the things that were most important to me. And I will also tell you that getting a little Brandon-like, a little creative on my response, I took a lot of long walks with my wife. A lot of walks, transition. Those of us lucky enough to have a significant other, making it a team sport. I cannot emphasize that enough. The sounding boards, the figuring out together what's most important to you, the freedom that you have, as you navigate the outside world, it's overwhelming. And the more we can do to make it a team decision, the better off you will be, and the more likely you are to stick your landing. And I think I read a statistic that the average military vet changes jobs within 13 months of leaving service, in part because they don't get the gift that the four of us were given of time and resources to get it right. So I'm pleased that so many of you are online today, and hopefully others are watching videos after we post this, because you are making transition a priority. You know that you're not alone in this endeavor, and there are tons of resources out there for you and people willing to help. So I just want to emphasize that. We have 10 minutes left. I think we've exhausted the current Q&A questions that we're stacking up. So I want to do a little open forum again, acknowledging that each member of this team or this panel was chosen for a reason, and to be able to communicate and share their story to a different constituency within the audience section. I'd like to start with our esteemed warrant officer, Carlos, and just share some thoughts that we have not spoken about that might be of particular interest to the individuals that resemble what you used to look like as we say in the Navy. I know you don't say in the Army, as a proud Mustang.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Sean, and you explained to me what a Mustang was, because we don't use that term in the Army, but it's all good. So really for me, and passing on to other Mustangs or warrant officers, the real big thing is to understand your skill set and try to translate that to civilian speak. So as technical experts, we're all very focused on our jobs and have specific things that the Army has trained us to do. And literally all that will transfer into a position that you're looking for. And really it comes down to your leadership. It comes down to your skills and ability to understand tough problems and deal with those problems and tackle that. That's really what, when I started doing my interviews through SkillBridge, was really understanding that and learning that that's what employers wanted. So being able to articulate that to them is really key. And I think it's just for warrant officers, Mustangs, is really just trying to translate your skill sets into civilian language.
Now, Kristin, I don't know about you, but the people that I engage with that are still on the inside or recent vets, the folks that seem to have the most challenging time of letting go and navigating transition because of the culture and so being so committed to mission, the senior enlisted folks. Can you address that group out there? Some things that they should hear from you?
Yeah, for sure. Because that was absolutely me, right? I mean, that is the core of who we are, especially as Navy chiefs, is taking care of everyone else, right? Like that is our entire existence. And you really have to take care of yourself as you transition. You can't avoid it. I mean, you can postpone it, but eventually you are going to have to face some things. And so I think it's better if you can kind of plan that out. Again, get you a Brandon for a mentor to help you kind of plot out that journey, because it's so important. I was calling it a mental health challenge, the whole transition from the military, which maybe is a little harsh or maybe is not like the right description. But whatever you want to call it, it is a stressful period where you have a lot going on. And a lot of us, I think, keep ourselves busy to distract from that silence where we have to think about ourselves and what we're going to do. And so my advice is to be able to take a step back, understand that all those people that you've been taking care of up until now it's your turn, they're going to continue to be taken care of. Somebody else is going to do that. And you need to focus on yourself. Which is not to say if you have influence in your command or in your environment with decision makers who are influencing subordinates' transition experience, I implore you to influence in a positive direction, to be more cognizant of your subordinates' military transition, be more empathetic about that, and consider it a metric that you're tracking. Sean, you mentioned that maybe you weren't a good teammate in that regard. I absolutely wasn't, just out of ignorance, right? It just was not something that was on my radar until it was my turn. And then all of a sudden, we become really aware of what that transition experience must be like. So please try to understand it early and try to support that for the people who work for you, because you will be making a difference. A profound difference.
Very good. Thank you, Kristin. All right, Brandon, representing the junior officers who may not have as much of a difficult time letting go, unless they're Mustangs, of course. No, I kid. Brandon, can you talk to your JOs out there?
Yeah, so JOs, JMOs, depending on your service, right? We have the largest responsibility when it comes to transitions of any of these groups. And I'll tell you why. We have an internal responsibility and an external responsibility. I'll start with the easy one. The internal responsibility, we don't have a retirement to lean back on, right? You have to transition well, especially if you have a family. You don't have a choice. You have to, as Kristin was saying, dedicate yourself to be self-focused, right? Be focused on your own needs. That's very different than being selfish, right? Selfish is to the detriment of other. Self-focus is you are holding yourself up, doing what you need to do for the sake of yourself and for the sake of your family, and ultimately for the sake of some of our benefit systems. So we're not paying out for every JO that struggles to find employment. So that's the internal responsibility. But more than that, you have an external responsibility. So we've heard these challenges of senior officers not doing it right, of senior enlisted not doing it right and struggling. Well, who else interacts with the junior enlisted, the senior enlisted, the junior officers, the senior officers, all groups on a daily basis? All right, it's a junior officer. You interact with every single one of those groups. And every single one of those groups eventually is going to transition, right? No one stays in the military forever, right? So the majority of people who transition are junior enlisted and junior officers. We're the majority that transition early on. And so if you don't take it seriously, if you don't be open and be communicative and have a public calendar, you are doing it to the detriment of the organization. Right? A senior chief would know a lot more about transition if when they were in E5, their JO was talking about transitions and providing that. So even when I was going to do a full 25 years in the Navy, I was training my sailors on transitions. We were having those conversations because I saw my sailors getting out and not knowing what to do. So even when I was an 01, 02, who was going to be a flag officer someday, I was still talking about their transition. So you have a responsibility to your junior sailors and your peers and your senior officers to talk about that transition, to make it part of your regular training and to do it right. So when it comes your time to do it, you're public about it. You're talking to your senior officers. You're talking to your chief and your senior enlisted. You're talking to your non-coms and letting those lessons learned percolate through the whole organization. So that is my recommendation to the JOs. You guys have the largest responsibility when it comes to this process, and own that.
Very good. So all three of you, I won't even try to speak to my constituency out there because everything you said should resonate with all of them as well. And giving themselves permission to take advantage of the resources is a hurdle that all of you guys should get over. I'm fortunate that I was able to. You heard stories about how Carlos and Brandon and Kristin were all able to as well. So I'll just close out by thanking you all for being here today or watching this video at your convenience. Reminding you that the CyberWire and Horizon 3 are both SkillBridge friendly organizations that really appreciate the value of the veteran. And that Kristin over at Ruddershift, one of her core areas of value is helping people navigate this transition through SkillBridge and other means. So once again, thank you. All four of us are on LinkedIn. If you want to reach out to any of us and have a deeper conversation, we're more than happy to do that.